In terms of when you set Clark's Room up, am I right in thinking then that you don't have barristers around the boardroom table?
Well, when I presented the business plan, two barristers at the time, there was 29 barristers in the chambers where I was, and two basically said to me after the meeting, if you do this, we want to be part of it. So we did start on day one with two barristers and one clerk. So we did have 2/3 barristers on, but the point was we were creating a business, whereas a traditional chambers is not a business in the business sense. I mean, I answer the word, is it a business, with can it be sold? So if you can't sell it, it's not a business. So there's chambers out there with very good brands, and they've done extremely well. But the members of the chambers are just the custodians of the brand at the time. There is no real value in it other than to them.
Yeah, that strikes a chord with me, because quite often when I worked with barristers' chambers, which I haven't done for about 10 years or so now, but the administration of the chambers came across as more like sort of a procurement company or an agency who was just providing the administrative support rather than any sort of business leadership. And it sounds as though that's something you were keen to change.
I think you do have to look back at history. I mean, we are trying to change the profession, but you've got to remember the history lesson, which is that the profession goes back to the mid-1500s. And the first barrister to be called at the bar was around the middle of the 1500s. The first inn was established, the first barrister was called to the bar, and the problem occurred that we are trying to solve. The problem occurred when the second barrister ever was called to the bar, because these two barristers said to each other, well, I'm just making this up, I don't know, but I can only assume this is how it happened. The second barrister said to the first one, well, this is silly, me getting a room and you getting a room. Why don't we just get a room together and sit across, get two desks and share the expenses? And then as solicitors started to ring up, and then as they needed to have someone to clean their shoes and all these things, which they did in those days, it was effectively a butler, they started to share expenses. And that model has not really changed other than structures being put in place. But at the end of the day, you have lawyers who are sharing expenses, and nowadays your expenses include £1 million worth of leases in commercial properties. So the liabilities are enormous, the staff costs are enormous, but it's still traditionally the same model.
And what were some of the challenges that you faced in terms of disrupting that model? Because much as the weaknesses of that traditional approach are clear, I would imagine that it is still a setup which is quite appealing, quite enticing to barristers and also perhaps to solicitors as well. So did you face any challenges in terms of your journey of disruption?
So our customers, if you like, it's a little bit more complicated, but to keep it really simple, our customers are two people. They're lawyers who instruct us, and they're barristers who we look after. And we sit completely in the middle. So the challenges that we've faced over the last 22 years since we started, are barristers still thinking that it's a new model 22 years in. Solicitors are happy with it. And we can walk into any firm in the country pretty much. We don't attract the sort of magic circle, the inner circle in the city, because they like to walk down to the Temple or take their American clients down there, and it's all very lovely. And you go to these chambers, and also you have a sort of insurance policy with going to a chambers like that. But that's a very, very small amount of the work at the bar. The volume work at the bar, the sort of the 75% or 80% of the work, solicitors don't have a problem at all. They're extremely happy with the service we provide. And so we've never had a problem getting work. It's getting the barristers to accept that our model is not a little bit quirky, and actually we're running a professional services business within law.
Yeah, you've managed to bring hundreds of barristers on board now, so it's clearly a message you've been able to get across. I mean, just in terms of those two customers, let's start with the law firm. I mean, one of the key features that I noted that appears very attractive from my perspective is this ability for solicitors to set their own budget. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so sort of going backwards a little bit, what we understand a solicitor wants, and we're told all the time, is we do not want barriers to be put in front of us when we have an instruction. So if you take something straightforward like the solicitors had a notice of hearing in their come in the post that morning, and they need a barrister for let's just say a high court case for one day on the 20th of March. So if you think about what happens at the moment in a lot of places, and there is good and bad practice out there, but if you think about what happens, what is the journey of the solicitor? Now, they may well have a chambers that they know quite well, and they can ring up the clerk and say, "Hi, Dave, how are you? How was the football?" And have that conversation. But if you don't know a chambers, and there are a lot of solicitors out there and a lot of junior solicitors who don't know a chambers, your choice is to Google, to ask somebody else in the firm. If you think about their journey, it's a real pain. There isn't a simple solution. So they will have some clerks they like, they will have some preferred chambers, then they ring them up, then they have a conversation, the clerk writes the information down, the clerk talks to the barrister, the clerks get some fees, they go back to the solicitor. Then the solicitor's on the phone on another matter, and 2-3 hours later or next day, you might be getting the quote across. And then all we've done in its absolutely most straightforward is we've put all of those barriers we've removed. We've tried to make the whole system accessible and the user journey really good. So when somebody comes on, I know this sounds very sort of brutal, but I need 17 bits of data. If you give me those 17 bits of data, I can tell you the answer, because I've got 200 diaries, but I don't. The answer is not to look at 200 diaries for that question. The answer is, which diary is it I need? So if I feed in the names of the parties, the level of the barrister, the fee that the solicitor is hoping to pay, I can pretty much come up with a solution without having to trouble anybody, because we've spoken to all the barristers and said, what is it you want to do? We actually have a preference database in the system, and we have 1.2 million options in that database that the barristers can put in. So if they only want to do work in Newcastle County Court on a Friday afternoon, and they're only willing to go for £1,000, and they're only willing to do intellectual property work, they will not be offered anything else. But of course they don't do that. It's much more flexible. So it's very rare that when a solicitor says, these are my 17 bits of data, this is the budget I've got, we will automatically suggest and say, well, look, the going rate across all the history we've got, 22 years data, is they're saying £300, say, for a small claim. And we say, well, look, the normal rate's $350, but it's up to you. And that more than often than not, they will just change the fee to what is proposed.